Welcome, gamers! Today, we will take a look at everything we know about the ever so complex node system in Ashes of Creation, as well as a few other systems that rely on the node system. As a disclaimer, all content I'll be discussing in today's video comes from information that has been delivered over the past 6 years. So, Ashes of Creation's plans may have changed and systems that have been explained in the past could act differently in the upcoming Alpha 2. Now with that in the air, let's kick things off with Intrepid Studios' very own game designer, Dr. Bucky.
Send nodes.
The first question we need to ask is, well, what is a node? A node is a predetermined location in the wilderness of Vera that has the potential to become a massive, growing civilization. To first establish a civilization, players will need to contribute to a node's experience by hunting monsters, collecting gatherable materials, and completing quests within its unique zone of influence. A zone of influence is the term for the space surrounding a node that tracks player activity. When a node reaches enough experience, it will automatically level up and advance, which will represent itself visually with the addition of NPCs and buildings. The architectural design of buildings in a node will be influenced by the dominant player demographic contributing to the node's development. So, in theory, a Dwarven town could eventually become an Elven town if there is a shift in the racial demographic interacting within that node. A lot of what we will experience in Ashes of Creation will be determined on the development of these nodes and what the game calls adaptive content. Adaptive content is what spawns certain dungeons or world bosses that are reactionary to the stimulus of player activity. In the land of Vera, there will be a total of 85 regular nodes and 15 additional castle nodes for guild-related content. All nodes will start at level 0 with the potential of progressing to a level 6 for a grand total of 7 node stages. At level 0, a node is in its wilderness stage. There will be no visual indicators that players are even within a node. Only the fact that we know every inch of land in Vera will be within some node's zone of influence. Ashes of Creation's developers speculate that it will take a few hours of players working together to advance out of this wilderness stage. Upon reaching a level 1 node, we enter its expedition phase. This will be the first time players get any idea of what type of node they are advancing. There are a total of 4 node types, but we will get into that a little bit later. In this expedition phase, we will get visuals of a growing node, which may display itself as a group of small merchant NPCs and pop-up tents with campfires. Commissions will probably become available at this stage, which are quests players can complete for rewards, and they will also contribute to a node's advancement. When a node reaches level 2, we enter the encampment phase. Here we will see a growth in the number of NPCs and probably an increased rarity of available commissions. In addition, we will see several more tents appear, as well as more permanent structures that an advancing civilization needs. Also, at this point, we can start to see the effects that high player traffic starts to have on the surrounding environment, such as a reduction of available gatherable materials, which could be the direct result of players over-harvesting materials over a short amount of time. Next, when we enter a level 3 node, it becomes a village. Visually, we will see a massive change from the temporary looking encampment to a permanently established town with full-blown houses, basic walls, and serviceable buildings. Reaching village status delivers a wide array of new content for players in the form of housing, local government, and the Vassal system. The Vassal system is complex, and I'll dive into it a bit deeper later in this video. Each of these 3 systems will rely heavily on how a node develops and deserve to be talked about individually. So first off, let's take a look at player housing. Player housing will come in a multitude of options in the form of static houses, apartments, inns, and freeholds. Static housing is not instanced and will be available on a first-come, first-served basis, with a total of 8 houses being available in the village stage. Housing will be able to be renovated and furnished as the player sees fit. As the node advances, so will your house at every new stage your node achieves. So if you can afford a house in a village, buy it. because you will receive free upgrades in housing size, which will be able to be sold to other players at later stages of a node's life for a sizable profit. It's like being on your own episode of Love It or List It. Go ahead, hire me as your real estate agent. Apartments and inns will be instanced. A total of 50 apartments will be available at the village stage, and there does not seem to be a limit on the number of rooms rented at an inn, as the inn is the most accessible form of player housing. Freeholds are the last form of housing, but deserve a whole video dedicated just to them, so I will just say that they offer your own plot of land to build on and will probably be very expensive. Any form of housing that we just talked about will be a necessity to obtain citizenship in a node. And why would we want to be a citizen instead of a wandering nomad, you may ask? Well, citizenship will grant players a number of benefits, some of which include reduced service fees and tax rates, access to unique vendors based off the node type, access to upgraded crafting benches, and even the ability to vote or run for mayorship. A player may only have citizen status at one node at any given time, and if citizenship is willingly renounced, a waiting period of 2 weeks is enacted before citizenship can be claimed at another node. So, think twice before walking away from a node. Players that lose citizenship as a result of a node being destroyed in a siege will not have a cooldown period to join another node, which leads me into the ultimate form of loyalty, the loyalty to your node. If a siege is declared on your home, it is a call to arms to defend it against any threat, even if it means killing members of your own personal social groups. That's right, if you find yourself at odds with a white wizard you once called friend and ally, you must destroy them to defend your home.
Saruman the White has ever been our friend and ally.
Before I get too carried away, let's talk about another key feature that appears in the level 3 node, the mayor. Mayors will have a plethora of options when dictating the development of a node. They can enact buy orders that reward players for turning in specific resources to generate commodities, which are the materials needed to construct or upgrade service buildings. They can initiate mayoral commissions, which are quests that will reward the node with commodities, reputation, mandates, and potentially buffs. Mayors can propose policies that will be voted on by the citizens of that node, which can benefit the node in a number of different ways. They can use mandates to bypass policy votes or initiate building construction. Mayors will also have the ability to establish diplomatic relations and trade agreements with other nodes, but if a node becomes vassalized, then that node will adopt the diplomatic relations established by the sovereign node. Mayors will have to be selected through a process that is different depending on what node type they are running for. Scientific nodes will hold elections that are decided by popular vote. Economic nodes will have a blind bid auction where the citizen with the highest bid wins office. Military nodes will have a trial by combat where players vying for power will enter a week-long PvP battleground state to secure objectives. Divine nodes will have a process for players to show devotion and gain favor through PvE means. Mayorship at a divine node seems to be more individual focused, so large guilds may not have a benefit when attempting to place their own members in office. At a level 4 node, the village becomes a town. As I mentioned before, player houses will automatically be upgraded and retain their position within the node. This means that they will be more centralized and protected in times of war, as homes can be destroyed in sieges. New houses will appear for sale, but will start at the size from the previous village stage. Social organizations run by NPCs, like a thieves guild or a trading company, will begin to develop and offer content focused for solo players to progress in. Advancing in a social organization will grant access to special shops and unique titles. Upon reaching the town phase, I speculate that we will start to receive adaptive content that results in meaningful story arc progression and unique regional bosses.
So yeah, when nodes level up, they will create new content, new story arcs will start, and story arcs are very big, like big area-changing things that can happen.
Right, well, like we saw with Carfin.
Like we saw with Carfin. This is one for Oakenbane.
A node that reaches level 5 becomes a city. Cities will increase in size once again, allowing for more player housing and probably unlocking more content related to social organizations that developed at the node below. A city will also unlock the ability to construct its very first Grandmaster crafting station, which are required to craft items of the highest tier. The most unique thing about reaching a city status is that it will come along with a reliquary. Reliquaries are buildings that will allow storage of unique relics, where these relics will have a range of different benefits. Examples of these benefits may include access to crafting legendary items or participation in legendary quest lines. The final form of a node, when it reaches its epitome of greatness, is the metropolis. A metropolis will be a massive collection of many different types of buildings spanning a diameter of about 500 meters, where every organization and religion in Vera is represented within its walls. A metropolis will allow construction of 2 Grandmaster crafting stations. This will also be the first time mansions become accessible for player housing, but these mansions are only obtained by the automatic progression of the small houses that were purchased by those 8 citizens all the way back from when this node was just a wee village. By progressing to Metropolis, the node is also rewarded with a unique superpower. This superpower is determined by what kind of node it is, so let's finally take a deeper look at the 4 node types. Scientific nodes. Scientific nodes place an emphasis on artisan progression and building construction. The artisan system is how players will develop their abilities to gather resources, process materials, and craft gear. So a scientific node may be the only place to progress certain artisan professions to the highest tier through a unique certification quest. If you want to become a Grandmaster in 1 or 2 of the many artisan professions Ashes has to offer, then placing your citizenship in an evolving scientific node may be the route for you. When a scientific node reaches a level 3 village, it will unlock its unique building type, the library. The library will be responsible for keeping records of each server's history and may give benefits such as information on runic power stones for gear enhancement and unique recipes. As a node advances, so will the power of the library, evolving into a college, university, and finally an academy. At the Metropolis level, teleportation is unlocked as the node's superpower. Teleportation will allow for fast travel to each node within their Vassal network. Teleportation in this form will be just one of 2 forms of instant travel across Vera. Economic nodes. Economic nodes will specialize in trading goods across the world of Vera and will respond to the game of supply and demand. If you are good at reading the politics of the world and want to take advantage of fluctuating prices in the auction house, then placing your citizenship in an economic node will be your route to become the wealthiest player on a server. Economic nodes come with a market that grant players access to some new systems, like the auction house and monster bounty hunting. It appears that auction houses, where players can buy and sell items to each other, will only be available in economic nodes and their vassal nodes. Markets will grant more unique benefits as they advance into exchanges, gallerias, and emporiums. When an economic node reaches its metropolis level, it unlocks a superpower to link economies with all other economic nodes in the world. This has the potential to create a massive auction house connecting every economic node in Vera. Military nodes. There is not too much known about military nodes just yet, but they will have a focus on PvP elements. These nodes will grant access to a bounty hunter progression system, which gives players a unique Pathfinder ability that is used to hunt down corrupted players across Vera. The potential of a hero system has also been discussed, like seen in Lineage 2, where players can fight in a 1v1 archetype-specific arena for hero status. Only one unconfirmed function of the military node's unique building, the barracks, has been discussed. The barracks could allow for recruitment of special NPCs during times of war. No potential superpower for a military node has been released. Divine nodes. There is also not too much known about divine nodes yet, but they will have a focus on progressing player religion and enchantments. Enchantments will offer forms of vertical and horizontal progression for equipment, like permanently upgrading your sword to do more damage, or granting a weapon specific damage types that are applicable to specific monsters, but offer no benefit in other situations. Temples will become available in divine nodes, granting access to religious organizations. Players will have their choice between 7 different religions, and they will be able to follow a progression path for their chosen religion. A divine node metropolis may unlock a dungeon beneath itself and its vassal nodes that will become home to unique bosses and unique drop tables. No superpower for a divine node has yet been released, unless the underground dungeon is associated with its intended superpower. Now, let's finally talk about the vassal node system. But first, I think it is important to discuss what dictates a node's zone of influence. My interpretation of available information is that Ashes of Creation uses a progression algorithm that calculates a node's zone of influence. The algorithm will take into account the nearest coastline, neighboring nodes, and player traffic. A zone of influence will increase every time a node levels up, and it may not necessarily reach nodes that are closest in proximity, but instead they could reach nodes across oceans or to nodes that players frequently travel between. Essentially, the same two nodes in separate servers could potentially have extremely different progression paths and vassal networks as they advance towards becoming metropolises. Okay, now let's talk about the vassal node system. A vassal node is a node that falls under control of another more advanced node, called a sovereign node. Entering this vassalship will lock a node out from progressing to a level that is equal or higher to its sovereign. These vassalized nodes are subject to the actions of their sovereign in regards to the development of alliances, war declarations, and even taxes. For a sovereign node to come into power and establish its vassal network, it must reach level 3. Because for the relationship to exist between a sovereign and a vassal, there needs to be established government, which we learned occurs at the village phase of a node. Based off this graphic, we see that a total of 13 nodes may be active under one vassalship. And Stephen Sharif, the creative director of Ashes Creation, said,
Because there are 85 nodes that are within the world, we have a buffer zone of about 20 nodes that lives in a max server state. So if you had maximum 5 metropolises form in a world, you will have a number about 20 nodes that can live alongside those metropolis networks.
And with simple math, we can see that the maximum number of 13 nodes in a vassalship multiplied by the maximum number of 5 potential metropolises equals 65 total nodes, which leaves out a total of those 20 buffer nodes Stephen referred to. But my question is, how do we get these buffer nodes? My answer is that it occurs before we even see one sovereign node in a system that I call shadow vassaling. Since we know that nodes cannot become sovereign until level 3, I don't think it's right to call what we are about to discuss a true vassalship. At the start of a server, all nodes will be equal, but when a node levels to 1, it will automatically shadow vassal other nodes within its zone of influence, which appears to max out at 2 based off this crude expansion of what we saw in a 2021 node simulation livestream, and this is consistent with the graphic we saw earlier. When this shadow sovereign levels up to 2, it can shadow vassal more nodes and absorb other established shadow networks, which can result in 3 or more nodes under the direct rule of one shadow sovereign. We can see an example of this here, here, and well, here. This contradicts what we saw in the graphic where a true sovereign node can only possess 2 other nodes in a cascading vassal network, which is why I think that shadow vassaling is an entirely different process altogether. Although, the 2021 node simulation could be using an outdated process as the total node count and map has changed since then. And we also see here that one level 5 sovereign node takes control over 3 level 4 nodes, which may confirm that they were using an outdated process. But let's entertain this idea of a shadow vassalship moving forward. When a node reaches level 3, it will finally become a sovereign and truly vassalize the 2 highest level nodes within its previously defined shadow network, or its newly expanded zone of influence. At this point, there will be some nodes across the whole world of Vera that were within a sovereign node's shadow vassalship, but now have fallen out of favor by being the least developed. These nodes that have fallen out of favor can no longer progress past a level 2 node, and they become buffer nodes. These buffer nodes can eventually advance when a vassal network starts getting destroyed through the means of war and sieges. From level 4 onward to a metropolis, a sovereign node will follow a more predictable path by maintaining relationships already established within its vassal network. Now, let's move on to a more interesting question. Why would a player want to maintain citizenship in a vassal node if it is locked out of progressing past its sovereign node? Well, being a citizen in a vassal node is not necessarily a bad thing. a vassal node will obtain benefits specific to the sovereign node's type, such as access to the auction house if the sovereign is an economic node that the vassal node would otherwise not have access to. The location of a vassal node may be advantageous if it has a closer proximity to locations of highly sought out after resources. The node type of the vassal may unlock certain benefits that a player is directly seeking that the sovereign node does not offer, such as religious progression. Access to certain crafting benches may only be available to citizens of that specific node. So, there are still incentives to living within a vassal node. A player must weigh the pros and cons before deciding to renounce their citizenship. This sums up everything that we know about nodes and some of the other systems that inherently rely on node development. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, there's a theory I want to propose to you. We know that Ashes of Creation runs on a system of adaptive content that is dependent on player activity and node progression. We also know that there is adaptive content that is not available until nodes start to reach their level 6 metropolis state. So, if there can only be 5 metropolises out of the 85 total nodes at any given time on a server, then I think we may quite literally never see content that Ashes of Creation have placed in their game unless every node eventually reaches a metropolis state. Do you agree? Or do you think this sort of content will be unlocked if any node in a specific region reaches a metropolis state? Let me know in the comments, and if you liked today's video, then give it a thumbs up or even hit that subscribe button, as I plan on exploring more of Ashes of Creation systems leading into Alpha 2 later this year.